The day I returned to my father's estate wasn't supposed to be significant. Not in the way it ended up being. My dad passed away just 3 weeks before. The funeral was small, understated, the way he would have wanted. Most of the people there were more business associates than friends, which said a lot about the man, I guess. Practical to a fault. He never believed in emotional displays. Everything was function, structure, responsibility. Growing up under that roof didn't leave much room for softness. But I respected the man. I wanted to do right by what he left behind. Ellie and I arrived at the house late the night before. The estate sat perched above the cliffs of Monterey, that stretch of coast where pine trees leaned toward the sea and the fog rolled in like a living thing. The house itself was a stunner. An old stone and timber place built in the 40s. All arched doorways and massive fireplaces. Felt like it had roots, a history. My history. Ellie had never been there before. I hadn't been either, not since I was a kid. My dad didn't exactly host family holidays. That morning, I had to head into town to sign a few things at the lawyer's office. Probate formalities mostly. Ellie offered to stay behind. Said she wanted to walk the grounds, maybe unpack a bit. I didn't think twice about it. In hindsight, that was my first mistake. The meeting wrapped up quicker than I expected. It was barely past 1 when I pulled back into the gravel drive. I took the side entrance, cutting through the gate near the old potting shed. The backyard stretched out beyond the house. Stone paths winding through fruit trees, wild roses spilling over the trellises. It smelled like salt and lemons. That's when I saw them. Ellie was standing near the lemon grove with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, lean build, maybe mid-30s. Tan arms, short sleeves, and that kind of casual confidence that immediately rubbed me the wrong way. They were laughing about something. Not a polite chuckle. Full-on laughter. Heads tilted toward one another. Bodies angled close in that way people naturally align when there's no distance between them. First, I just watched. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. It wasn't just the closeness. It was Ellie's face. She looked light, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in a while. Her shoulders weren't tense. Her smile wasn't performative. That smile was genuine. It stung more than I expected. She hadn't noticed me yet. I took a step forward, gravel crunching underfoot. Her head turned sharply. Her face went through about 3 different expressions in a second. Surprise, something like guilt, and then that practiced, easy warmth she always wore in public. "Hey, babe," she called out, lifting a hand. "You're back already?" The man beside her turned too. He smiled wide, confident, maybe a touch too friendly, and extended a hand as I approached. "Chris, right?" he said. "I'm Jared. I live next door, well, a couple properties over. Sorry to meet under these circumstances. Your dad was a bit of a legend around here." I shook his hand, nodded, and tried to hide how thrown I felt. "Nice to meet you," Ellie piped in quickly. Jared was just showing me the lemon trees. Apparently they're really old, some kind of heirloom variety. He knows a lot about this stuff. Her voice was a little too high, a little too rehearsed. Jared gave a sheepish shrug. "Grew up on a farm, actually. My mom's a botanist. Just nerd stuff." I forced a smile, but I couldn't take my eyes off Ellie. Her posture had changed, not quite defensive, but more aware. She was watching me the way you watch someone when you're waiting to see how much they've figured out. "We were just talking about drainage," she added. "The roots might be too exposed on the slope." He was explaining how the incline affects water retention. I figured it'd be good to know, right? "Sure," I said. My voice came out more clipped than I intended. The conversation that followed was painfully polite. Jared kept it light, asking questions about the estate, dropping hints about how tight-knit the neighborhood was. Ellie interjected now and then, her tone bouncing between casual and overly helpful, like she was trying too hard to steer the mood back toward normal. After about 5 minutes, Jared gave a quick nod and said he had to run. "I'll let you two settle in. If you need anything, I'm just down the hill. Big white house with the cedar fence. Don't be strangers." He gave me a quick wave, but his eyes lingered on Ellie just a half second too long before he turned and walked off through the garden path. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. Ellie smoothed her hands down her jeans, then gave me that look. The one that was supposed to read as open, casual, unaffected. "He's nice," she said. "Very helpful. I figured it was good to start meeting people around here, since we'll be spending a lot of time now." "Yeah," I said. "Makes sense." She nodded, but her jaw tightened just slightly, like she was waiting for me to say something else, to accuse her, to ask the question I hadn't asked yet. But I didn't. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked toward the house. Inside, I busied myself with unloading the car. She followed me in, talking too much about how beautiful the garden was, how we could turn the guest house into an office or Airbnb. She asked if I remembered the fireplace in the den, and how we should get it cleaned. She was spinning ideas, filling the air with noise, and I let her. I nodded along, answered when I had to. But inside, something had already shifted. I couldn't stop seeing it. That soft look on her face when she thought I wasn't watching. The way she touched his arm like it was second nature. I told myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid, that I was reading into something harmless because grief does weird things to your head. But I knew better. I knew Ellie, and something about what I'd just seen didn't fit. That night, while she slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the scene in the backyard over and over. My gut had never screamed at me like that before, and now it wouldn't shut up. She'd given me an explanation. She'd looked me in the eye and told me everything was innocent. And I smiled. I nodded. I let her believe I believed her. But something in me had gone still, watchful, because that moment, the lemon trees, the laughter, the way she'd looked at him like I wasn't real, wasn't going anywhere. It had already carved itself into the back of my mind. And deep down, I knew it was just the beginning. That night, after I saw Ellie with Jared in the garden, I didn't sleep. Not really. She drifted off within minutes, her breathing even, her body curled toward the window like always. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling fan, feeling the shadows stretch and shrink across the room as the blades turned overhead. The wind outside rattled the old window panes every so often, and each time, I found myself hoping for something. Maybe a sign I was overreacting. Maybe a reason to let it go. But I couldn't. Not this time. I've always been the type to give the benefit of the doubt. It's one of those traits people call a strength until it turns into a liability. And I'll admit, Ellie had used that more than once. I didn't see it at first. Love makes excuses look like logic. But that night, with the fog rolling in and that image of her smiling at another man burned into my mind, all those little red flags started lining up like puzzle pieces. All the things I had brushed off, the small gut-check moments, the split-second glances, the hesitations in her voice, came flooding back. It started weeks before the funeral. We'd been in a weird place for a while. Nothing overtly bad. No screaming matches, no long cold wars. Just distance. She'd become harder to read. Quieter in the mornings, more distracted at night. I chalked it up to stress. She was juggling projects at work and always talking about how burnt out she felt. I bought her candles. I planned a weekend trip. I thought I was helping. But maybe I was just missing the point. I remember the day I told her my father had passed. I expected tears, or at least a moment of silence, but she blinked, put a hand on my arm, and asked if that meant the estate was ours now. Not how I was feeling. Not what I needed. She didn't even ask how he died. Just, so, what happens to the house? I told myself she was trying to stay practical, that she didn't want to overwhelm me with emotion. But it stuck with me, the way her tone shifted when she asked about the property, like something in her had flicked on. From that day forward, her entire demeanor changed. She went from distant to suddenly invested. She asked questions about the house, about the land, about the business my father left behind. She'd barely tolerated conversations about my family before. Now she was reading old emails, asking about appraisals, zoning, trusts. She even started hinting that we should spend more time at the estate. Maybe a few weeks to settle things? Or even longer if it feels right. I remember sitting across from her at dinner one night, watching her flip through a binder of legal paperwork like it was a vacation brochure. She had always hated formality, couldn't sit still for anything financial or legal. But now she was annotating things, highlighting terms she didn't understand, looking up tax law on her phone. And I wanted to believe it was just her way of helping. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew it was something else. Not just curiosity, investment. And then there were the outings. Ellie never used to be the errands type. We always did things together. Grocery runs, weekend markets, even dumb stuff like returns at Target. It was our thing. But in the last few months, that changed. She started running out for a few things more often, saying she'd be back soon, but returning hours later, offering vague explanations about long lines or catching up with a friend. And then there was the perfume. She hadn't worn fragrance in years, said it gave her headaches. Suddenly she had this new scent. It was floral but sharp, almost spicy. Definitely not anything I recognized. She'd come home smelling like it, brush past me casually, and say something like, "That boutique in town is using scent marketing now. Isn't that wild?" I wanted to believe her. I always wanted to believe her. I also started noticing how carefully she handled her phone. Before, she was careless, always leaving it around, unlocked, face up. Lately, it was glued to her, always face down, always on silent. She'd jump slightly whenever it buzzed. Once, she even turned her body away from me while texting at the dinner table, something she'd never done before. I brought it up once, just casually asked if everything was okay. She smiled like she always did when she wanted to deflect. "Of course, work's just intense lately. You know how it is." I nodded. Let it go. That was on me. Then there was the shift in her attitude about us. For years, marriage had been a touchy topic. She wasn't sure she believed in it. She said she liked things the way they were. We talked about it more than once, but she always pushed the idea aside like it was some outdated relic. I respected that. We were committed in every way that counted. But then, just 2 weeks before the funeral, she brought it up. "I've been thinking," she said one night, out of the blue. "Maybe it's time we really build a life together. Make it official." I remember blinking at her, fork halfway to my mouth. "You mean, get married?" "Yeah," she said. "Why not? Life's too short. We've been through so much already." Caught me off guard. I should have questioned the timing, but I didn't. I was just happy she wanted to move forward. Felt like a breakthrough. But now, lying there, in my father's old bedroom, her back turned to me, the faint scent of that unfamiliar perfume still clinging to her skin. I couldn't shake the thought that her sudden change of heart had nothing to do with love, that maybe it had everything to do with the estate, with the inheritance, with the security, with Jared. I didn't know when she met him. Maybe during one of those errands. Maybe they'd crossed paths after my dad's death. Or maybe, God help me, maybe she knew him before. Maybe the move to the estate wasn't just convenient for us. Maybe it was convenient for her. And that scared me more than anything, because it meant I hadn't just missed a single red flag. I'd missed a whole field of them. And now they were all waving in my face at once. I turned to look at her in the dark. She looked peaceful, like nothing was wrong. And in that moment, I realized something painful. She was already gone. Maybe not physically, maybe not legally, but the person I thought she was, the woman I had trusted with everything, that version of her didn't exist anymore. If she ever had, I didn't want to believe it. I still wanted to find some reasonable explanation. But that wasn't honesty. That was just fear. And fear was no longer a good enough reason to lie to myself. So I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to steel myself. Because I knew now, I had to find the truth. And I had to be ready for what came next. The thing about suspicion is it doesn't rest. It doesn't back down. It gnaws at you, digs in like a splinter just under the skin. And once it's in, there's no ignoring it. Not for long. A couple days passed after I saw Ellie with Jared in the backyard. I didn't confront her. I didn't mention it again. Instead, I waited, watched. I let the silence fill the space between us and studied what she chose to do with it. She filled it with chatter, small plans, and exaggerated gestures of affection. She kissed my cheek more often, asked if I was okay more than usual, and offered to make breakfast even though she never cooked. But it all felt like theater, like she was playing a part in a story she thought I still believed. I started taking morning walks along the edge of the property, partly to clear my head, partly to get a better sense of what my father had left behind. The land stretched deep into a wooded area at the back, past the stone path and the overgrown greenhouse. There was a gazebo tucked away there, something out of an old postcard, complete with peeling white paint and ivy crawling up the posts. I hadn't been back there since we arrived. On one of those walks, I found a cigarette but crushed into the dirt by the bench inside the gazebo. Ellie doesn't smoke. Neither do I. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Jared might have come through to check on something. There were workers on the property earlier in the week, clearing out gutters and trimming the olive trees near the bluff. I tried to let it go. But the truth was, I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. I remembered something from the day of the funeral, a conversation I'd had with a local supplier named Denny. My dad had worked with him for years. He ran a materials yard and small landscaping outfit just outside town. He'd shown up late to the service and barely said a word, but I remembered him pulling me aside afterward. "If you need anything," he'd said, eyes flicking toward Ellie, "don't hesitate to call. Sometimes, folks around here get a little too comfortable when things change hands." At the time, I thought he was talking about business contracts. Now, I wasn't so sure. I gave him a call that afternoon, told him I was still getting my bearings, and asked if he had time to come by and talk about continuing my dad's maintenance contracts. He agreed, and we set a time for the following morning. Denny arrived right on schedule. Older guy, gray stubble, sun-darkened skin. He didn't bother with small talk. We walked the grounds for a bit, went over the irrigation, fencing, and the condition of the guesthouse roof. As we rounded the trail behind the greenhouse, I stopped and asked him a direct question. "Did you know Jared well?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Denny paused. "You mean the neighbor?" "Yeah. Ellie's been talking with him. Says he knows a lot about the land." Denny's jaw tightened ever so slightly. "Yeah, he knows plenty." "What do you mean?" He looked at me for a long moment, then reached into his truck and pulled out a small USB stick. "I wasn't going to show you this unless you asked," he said. "Didn't want to cause problems unless there was already something to cause problems about." I stared at the drive. "What is it?" "My truck's got a dash cam," he said. "Motion activated. I park it down by the side trail when I'm working the upper lot. About 5 days ago, I came back to find it had recorded something. Well, strange. Didn't feel right keeping it to myself." I took the USB without a word. Back inside, Ellie was in the study, rearranging books that didn't belong to her. I told her I was heading into town again. She smiled, said, "Take your time," and went back to alphabetizing titles she'd never read. I drove straight to a coffee shop with Wi-Fi and popped the drive into my laptop. The footage wasn't long, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. The angle was static, low, sh*T through the windshield of Denny's truck, which had been backed into a clearing near the slope. It faced a side path I hadn't even noticed before, half hidden under tall grass and old oak branches. And there they were. Ellie stepped out of the side door of the estate, the one near the laundry room. She was wearing the same oversized cardigan she'd had on earlier that week, her hair up, sunglasses perched on her head. She moved quickly, glancing behind her like she was making sure no one saw. Then Jared appeared. He emerged from the trail like he knew exactly where to go. They didn't speak at first, just walked toward each other like magnets. And then, without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms. They kissed. Long, slow, like it was normal, like it was routine. My heart dropped. They stood there for a while just holding each other. Jared said something, and Ellie laughed, leaning into his chest. Then they turned and walked deeper into the woods, toward the gazebo. The footage ended there. I sat there, fingers clenched around the laptop, like if I just squeezed hard enough, it would make the last 5 minutes disappear. But it didn't. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't paranoia or overthinking. It wasn't a friendly neighbor showing off his citrus pruning technique. It was betrayal. Real. Tangible. Caught on camera. Played it again. Once. Then again. Each time, it hurt in a new way. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the ease, the timing, the obvious familiarity. This wasn't a one-time thing. This had been happening. I didn't know how long, but it didn't matter. It was long enough. Suddenly, every odd moment, every excuse, every smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, all of it snapped into place. I'd known something was wrong. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. But the denial couldn't survive this. By the time I got home, it was dark. Ellie was on the couch, flipping through a design catalog, talking about how we could renovate the kitchen. She looked up when I walked in and smiled, the kind of smile that used to mean something. Now it felt like a mask. I stood there for a moment, watching her, wondering how long she'd been lying to me, wondering if she even felt bad about it, if it even registered. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "Just tired." She nodded and went back to her catalog. I walked past her and into my father's office, locked the door, sat down, and began making plans. This wasn't going to be a conversation. This wasn't going to be tears and apologies and half-truths. This was going to be clean, quiet, final. I wasn't going to let her turn this into a performance. I was going to show her what consequence really looked like. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, but because I refused to. There was something empowering about finally knowing. No more doubts. No more second-guessing myself in the dark or rewriting conversations in my head to find some version where it all made sense. I had the truth now, and with the truth came clarity. By morning, the fog had rolled in thick across the coast. The estate was silent, cloaked in gray. Ellie was already up, humming softly in the kitchen, pretending, as always, that things were normal, that we were normal. I watched her from the hallway for a moment. She was pouring coffee, scrolling through her phone with that faint half-smile she wore when she was messaging someone else. Probably Jared. Maybe planning their next secret meeting, maybe reminiscing about the last one. I turned away. I didn't feel rage. Not then. Rage is messy, loud, and it lets the other person see they still have power. What I felt was something sharper, focused, surgical. I was done playing the fool. I wasn't going to beg for answers or lash out. I wasn't going to give her a single inch of emotional ground. I was going to take control, the way my father would have. The first thing I did was pull out the prenuptial agreement we'd signed years ago, tucked away in a drawer in my father's old office. Back when Ellie and I were still playing house. Back when I had something to protect and she pretended she had no interest in it. The prenup was airtight. My lawyer had insisted. My father had insisted harder. Everything I'd owned before the marriage stayed mine. The estate, the business, the trust. The agreement couldn't have been more generous in hindsight. Ellie had even laughed at it when she signed it. "I'm not after your fortune," she'd said. "This is just paperwork." She had no idea that those papers would end up being her exit slip. I called my lawyer that morning Stephen Marks. Old school, efficient, and ruthless when he needed to be. "She cheated?" he asked after I explained. "Caught on video. Then we move fast," he said. "I can have documents drawn up within 24 hours. Do you want confrontation or silence?" "Silence." "Understood. We'll deliver the documents in person. No debate, no room for negotiation. Let her read it in black and white." By noon the next day, the packet was ready. Divorce. On grounds of adultery. Under the terms of the prenup, she would receive nothing but the possessions she brought into the marriage. No spousal support. No stake in the estate. No claim on the business. No more pretending. I didn't tell her right away. I waited one more day. One more chance to observe her. How she moved through the house. How she smiled at me like I was still under her spell. How she touched my shoulder in passing like she hadn't just handed her heart to another man. That night, I laid the documents out on the dining table, neatly stacked, a pen resting on top. She found them in the morning. I was in the sunroom when I heard her heels click to a stop. "Chris?" she called out, voice uncertain. I didn't answer. A few seconds later, she appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale. The color had drained from it so fast I almost didn't recognize her. She held the packet like it was radioactive. "What is this?" she asked. I turned a page in the book I wasn't reading. "You know what it is." She stared at me, eyes wide. This is a divorce petition." I nodded. Her breath hitched. "You're divorcing me?" I looked at her then. "Finally. You made that decision for both of us the day you walked into the woods with him." She flinched. Just slightly. "I don't know what you think you saw." "I saw enough." "Chris, please, can we just talk about this?" "We're past talking." Her voice cracked. "You're not even going to give me a chance to explain?" "There's nothing to explain. I've seen it. I've heard enough excuses. I know exactly what happened. And more importantly, I know who I'm dealing with now." That's when the tears came. Real or rehearsed, I'll never know. She staggered back a step, pressing a hand to her chest like I'd physically struck her. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was lost. I didn't know how to tell you things weren't working." "Then you shouldn't have kissed another man behind my back," I said calmly. "You should have used words. You should have had the courage to say what you felt before it got to this." "I still love you," she said, almost in a whisper. "No," I replied. "You don't. You love comfort. You love the version of me that provides. But love, that would have stopped you." She sat down hard on the edge of the couch. "You don't understand. You're right. I don't. And I don't need to." I stood, walked past her without flinching. "You need to pack your things. You're not staying here. Chris, you'll be escorted out by the afternoon. Whatever you can't carry will be sent to whatever address you give my lawyer." Her eyes widened. "Escorted?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She knew what I meant. I had already called Richard, one of the longest-standing employees my father had trusted. Quiet man, respectful, sharp as nails. He had handled estate matters since I was in middle school. He didn't ask why I needed him that day. Just showed up and waited in the hallway, while Ellie stumbled from room to room gathering pieces of a life she thought would last forever. She tried one more time before she left. We stood in the front hallway, the morning light stretching across the checkered tile floor. Her suitcase was at her side. Her face blotchy, makeup streaked. She reached for my hand. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she said, voice raw. "I was stupid. But I swear, I never stopped caring about you." I stepped back. "Goodbye, Ellie." She stood there for a beat, maybe waiting for me to change my mind, maybe expecting some grand emotional gesture. But I had no words left, just silence. Richard opened the door. She walked out, and just like that, she was gone. The house was quiet again. Still, not peaceful exactly, but cleaner somehow. Honest. I stood there for a long time, listening to the faint hum of the ocean beyond the cliff. She thought I was weak because I didn't shout, because I didn't chase her down and make a scene. But strength doesn't always sound like thunder. Sometimes, it's the silence that means everything is finally over. People like Jared think they get away with it. They think they can sneak into someone's life, tear open something sacred, and walk away with a shrug and a half-hearted apology if they're ever caught. They assume the fallout only matters to the people directly involved. The betrayed husband? A temporary problem. The marriage? Already broken, right? That's how they sleep at night, with rationalizations and lies they tell themselves in the dark. But I wasn't going to let Jared walk away untouched. There's a law in North Carolina and a few other states called alienation of affection. Most people don't even know it exists, but it does. And it holds third parties, lovers, meddlers, anyone who inserts themselves into a marriage, accountable for the damage they cause. And thanks to the video Denny gave me, I had proof. Solid, visual, time-stamped proof that Jared had intentionally and repeatedly inserted himself into my relationship and played a direct role in its collapse. I called Stephen, my lawyer, the day after Ellie left. "I want to file an alienation of affection suit," I said flatly. He didn't blink. "Against Jared? Is there anyone else?" He paused. It's a difficult suit. They're rare and they attract attention. I'm not doing this for attention, I replied. I'm doing this because it's what he deserves. Another pause. Then, all right, if you're serious, we'll need to document everything. Timeline, communications, video evidence, witnesses, everything. I've got all of it, I said. Start building. The next few weeks were consumed with strategy. Ellie, to her credit, or maybe her lawyers, didn't fight the divorce. Once she saw the prenup in action, she knew there wasn't much to gain by dragging it out. She signed. She left. The estate was mine again, clean and untethered. But Jared wasn't out of reach. We built the case from the ground up. I handed over the truck cam footage, then pulled call records, property surveillance logs, and even dug into my father's estate logs. He kept everything, including a visitor log that showed Jared had been showing up uninvited long before Ellie and I arrived. Denny agreed to testify, as did a former groundskeeper who'd seen Jared meeting a woman who looked like your wife on the trail behind the orchard. Ellie's text logs, recovered with some digital forensics help, sealed the rest. There were no explicit messages left. She deleted most of them, but fragments remained. Sentences like, "When can I see you again?" And "He's starting to suspect something." Enough to imply in asterisk Macy, secrecy, and intent. Stephen crafted the case like a scalpel. Precise, controlled, devastating. Jared's lawyer reached out within a week of receiving the notice. His tone was casual, as if we could clear this up with a conversation. I declined. 2 days later, a settlement offer arrived, lowball, of course. Barely enough to cover legal fees. I didn't even read past the first page. We pushed forward. Jared tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, of course. Said he didn't know Ellie was married. A lie. He referenced me by name in a message Ellie had deleted, but we recovered. Claimed their relationship had only become physical after she left me. Claimed the video Denny had captured was edited and taken out of context. The judge didn't buy it, nor did the jury. What Jared hadn't anticipated, what most people in his position don't anticipate, is how bad it looks when someone appears on camera with another man's wife in a secluded spot, kissing her like they're the ones wearing rings. That footage played on the courtroom screen in cold, clinical silence. The room felt smaller afterward. His lawyer looked uncomfortable. Jared himself didn't even try to meet my eyes. Ellie didn't appear in court. She submitted a statement, generic, deflective, passive. She said their relationship developed organically, and that she regretted the pain it caused. No apology. No real acknowledgement. Just words on paper like the rest of her had evaporated. When the verdict came, it wasn't just about money. It was about acknowledgement. The court ruled in my favor. Jared was ordered to pay significant compensation, an amount that made the local paper and, more importantly, hit where it hurt, his reputation. See, Jared ran a small but growing real estate firm. His face was on every sign along Highway 1. Integrity, community, trust. That was his slogan. Bit ironic, really. After the lawsuit, his name became radioactive. Word spread fast around the county. Vendors dropped him. Clients pulled contracts. A longtime associate gave an anonymous quote to the paper. "If that's how he handles personal boundaries, I don't want to see what he does with contracts." He tried to salvage things, released a statement full of legal jargon and damage control. But it didn't matter. The perception had shifted. He was no longer the smiling local guy on billboards. He was the man who broke up a marriage and got sued for it. And lost. One morning, maybe 2 weeks after the verdict, I drove past one of his signs near the town square. Someone had spray painted over his face in red. Homewrecker. Juvenile? Maybe. But I didn't shed a tear. I didn't celebrate either, not in the way people expected. There was no champagne, no victorious smile in the mirror. Just a quiet, grounded sense of finality. I didn't sue him for revenge. Not really. I sued him because I refused to let him rewrite the story. I refused to be the man quietly discarded while someone else lived out their fantasy in my home, on my land, while pretending none of it had consequences. He'd taken something from me. Maybe not Ellie, because by the end, I realized she was never really mine in the way that mattered, but he'd taken time, trust, and peace. This lawsuit, it was how I took some of it back. In the months that followed, Jared's company shrank. He laid off most of his staff. The office by the waterfront closed. His social media went silent. Last I heard, he'd moved to Santa Barbara, trying to rebuild under a different name. It won't work. People remember. As for me, I stayed put. I cleaned the estate room by room, replaced furniture, repainted the walls, took down anything that reminded me of what I thought I had. The land felt different now. Not haunted, not heavy, just mine. Steven sent me a final notice when the payments began hitting the account. I barely glanced at it. The money wasn't the point. The point was that he lost. He thought he could take and walk away. But I made sure he carried something with him too. Something permanent.